Sorry, I haven't shaved. You would think I'd have a lot more time, but a little scruffy today. Who's here first? Justin Aducci. Hi. 1,000 Pine Points to you for being here first. Got some bad news. Really bad news. I've been exposed, I think, to the virus. So I got 7 days to figure out if I'm have a 20% chance of getting sick and a 5% chance of going to the hospital. Isn't life grand? Confirmed case, been exposed to. So it's a waiting game for me and my wife. My kids I'm not worried about. They're young. Someone said in the live stream chat that interesting question. Why is Destin Wilson Sandlin? Is Wilson his middle name? Why is he a Christian? I think I figured it out. Anyhow, this is a video that a subscriber said I should go through. Oh man, I always forget the name, but 1,000 Pine Points to whoever suggested this. You know who you are. I'll make sure the home office in Wichita, Kansas credits you the 1,000 Pine Points. And he said, Doug, you should go through this and try to figure out why exactly this guy is a Christian. And I'm going to start at around the 40-minute mark, 37-minute mark. And I think I figured it out. And we'll see if you guys can figure it out as well. I'll probably tell you. Would you like people to pray for your health? Asked Craig in the bag. That's an interesting question. I guess if your God exists, and I guess if your God intervenes and cares, then sure. But here's the question: why not pray for everyone, not just me? I understand why. It's Craig in the bag. I understand you love me more than most people, but you really should pray for everyone, right? And then if your God is real, if the Jesus, the Christian God is real, and let's say he does intervene and heal me, although there's nothing to be healed so far. I don't think I'm sick, but why me then if he does intervene and not someone else who's more deserving than me, right? That's the question. Like, if you're a Christian, or if you believe in any God that intervenes in a miraculous way, every time your God helps you with something, then you have to ask the question, but why didn't he help this person with the same need? And I think that has to eat you up inside, doesn't it? Or are you so selfish to think that, well, he loves me so much that he helped me, and yeah, he loves my neighbor, but I guess it just wasn't his time. I mean, it was his time to die or whatever. Like, the cognitive dissonance that the Christian has to go through, who believes that God intervenes every day in the specific needs of his followers, you have to struggle with this stuff. If you have any empathy for your fellow man at all. Like, I've told the story before. My dad said that he believes God healed him from cancer and from heart attack, and he's had several health problems 10 years ago. And he's had close friends who had similar ailments who have died. My dad's 80 years old. He's had a lot of friends who have died. Why is he alive, and why did God not intervene for them? Or maybe God intervened to kill his friends and didn't intervene and just let my dad lived through science, and he got better through science and medical science and so forth. Like, that's another question you have to ask as a Christian. I'm vamping here. I'm off topic from Destin here, but my goodness, the mental gymnastics you have to go through, that you have to think about if you're a thinking human being, when you believe in an intervening God, it opens yourself up to get eaten up mentally, right? Am I wrong here? There's only so much time in a day to pray, says Craig, but I can pray for many people. Well, it's not so much just the praying part, Craig, that you have to worry about doing. It's accepting the answer to prayer. This is what I'm getting at. I can put myself in your worldview. I can assume it's true. But if your God answers prayers, in some cases, to the affirmative, what the prayer is about, and not in others, then you have to ask the question, but so-and-so was more deserving of life than the other person because that person has young kids, and let's say it's a father and needs to support the family or whatever. And this single guy who has no dependents, very few responsibilities, why did God let that person live and this other person die? Like, you're basically left with the Lord works in mysterious ways. That's what you're left with, I guess. But anyhow, let's get back to Destin and see why exactly. By the way, if you don't know who this guy is, then I can't help you. He has a huge internet channel. What is it? I got it up here. He's 39 years old. Just a youngin', 4 kids from Alabama. I think he has like 9 million subs, 5 million subs, something like that. Craig says, okay, it's your funeral. Oh, you cut me deep. That was harsh.
So, skepticism, let's talk about it.
Oh, that's too fast. I always forget to slow it down for the viewing public.
Is skepticism a tool that you can use to arrive at a more perfect truth about the world, or is it a philosophy? Like nothing's true until it's proven 100%? Or
So the question is skepticism a tool or philosophy? I think depending what type of person you are, you'll either say tool, philosophy, or both. I lean more towards it's a tool for discovering what's more probably true.
is it a tool that you can use to arrive at the truth easier? What is it? I don't know. This is for you. You know, this is for your brain, for you to have a discussion in your brain. Is the point to get to the truth, or is the point the skepticism itself?
So this is at Skepticon, and you can hear people in the background saying, truth, truth, truth. And I'm not sure if Destin was actually a little shocked by hearing this, that there's so many atheists in this audience that care about the truth. And dare I say, truth that's not dependent on the human brain, in other words, not this postmodern stuff.
What is the point? I don't know, something to think about. What is the point? We're at Skepticon. Why are we at Skepticon? Is the point skepticism, or is the point truth? Something to think about. So I want to talk about something that I call my threshold of belief. We're getting into the weird part now where I'm weird, and you and I are so stinking similar. We are like rock solid, boom. I've been promised a mountain of high fives. I'm going to deliver my half of the mountain of high fives. I mean, we are like right there together. And
so here's a Christian saying to probably a room full of mostly atheists, we are so stinking similar. I think putting myself in the Christian worldview, I don't think he really can say that. I like to point this out over and over again that, no, if you're a Christian and you believe the Bible is God's word and so forth, I think you're left with saying that there's those who walk in light and those who walk in darkness, that you shouldn't be of the world, but in the world, that there's the people who accept Jesus and the people and follow Jesus, and then there's the people who reject Jesus and don't follow Jesus. And they're worlds apart. They're not stinking similar.
And then
the volume is, and the sound quality of this video is not the best, Shell. So I think I got it as loud as I can. There's a bit of an echo. But yeah, I think, let me double check something. I think I have it as loud as I can go. We'll see if this works.
we're looking at the data of this world just a little bit differently. So this is what I call the threshold of belief. I can't tell you what I'm doing in this picture.
Okay, this is important, what he's about to say here. Threshold of belief.
But what I can tell you is the thing I'm messing with a wrench has the ability to kill me instantly.
Kill me. This is a clue where he's headed or how he's thinking.
There's no jokes or anything like that. Thing can kill me. What I do is dangerous work, okay? And at some point, if I'm ever going to move off of top dead center and make a decision and do anything other than talk about these interesting things, if I'm ever going to make a decision and do something, I have to get to a point where I can say, okay, I think I know enough information about this system to make a decision to do something like this. And I don't think it's going to kill me.
Yeah. See, when I hear him talking about doing his experiments, dangerous experiments, and he has to have a threshold of belief that he's not going to get hurt, I can't help but think he's talking about Christianity here. That he actually thinks if he doesn't believe it, Christianity, that he can get hurt.
That's heavy. That's heavy stuff. Especially when you got kids at home, right? These are the sorts of things I do every day. So what is your personal threshold of belief? What has to happen in order for you to move from, okay, probably, to, let's do it, it's not going to kill me? What does it take for you to get there? It's something to think about. It really is. It's something I've thought about every single week of my professional career because it's something I have to deal with, and it's not a joke. It's real big boy stuff. So think about it in your brain. What is the threshold belief? Do you have to see it with your eyes? Do you have to, I don't know. Everybody has something. And this is probably what the number line looks like. So you've got 100% right here. You have to 100% be proven that whatever it is that the person's trying to sell you or prove to you or whatever, you're either there or maybe you're down here. More likely than not, probably won't kill me. You know? I've met people like that. Crazy. Anyway, so
it's an interesting scale that he didn't go down to 0%, that it definitely won't kill me, that experiment.
Most people are somewhere in here. People are complicated, right? People are complicated.
Yeah, most people are in the middle. The people on the far right, when it comes to Christianity, would it be the presuppositional type Christians who are 100% no, this has to be true, because if it isn't, then everything is absurd and you can't account for anything and blah, blah, blah.
The cool thing about having a brain yourself, and the cool thing about me having a brain myself, is I get to pick out which dot I'm going to be on, okay? It's pretty cool. It's interesting to think about. I call this the threshold of belief. And it's not fancy. This is Alabama simple words. This is kind of how I can process this stuff. The reason the threshold belief...
By the way, this is why he has a very popular YouTube channel, because he has the ability to take complex scientific topics and simplify them so the average person can understand.
It's so important to me is I got some kids at home, and I know that they depend on their daddy. And they depend on their daddy to come home and feed them at night, and they depend on their daddy for hugs, and they depend on all this sort of stuff. So my threshold of belief, I kid you not, I've quantified it. I've said this in super important meetings. My threshold of belief is what I call the Sadie test. I have a beautiful little girl, her name is Sadie, and I say, you know what, I have to get enough understanding on this system to know that it's safe to the point that I would do this with Sadie standing right beside me.
See, and I think the converse is true for him when it comes to Christianity. Like, this is all leading to why he's a Christian. He believes that I think that the consequences of not being a Christian is so dangerous that it will affect his own kids, because if he doesn't raise them as a Christian, odds are they're not going to be a Christian, and their eternal destiny is at stake.
Because I love her. Man, I love that girl. I love all my kids, but I call it the Sadie test because I had her first, and I started doing this stuff back when she was young. That's my threshold of belief. I've quantified it. So what is your threshold of belief? What's interesting is...
You're right, Karag. This sounds like secular humanism or well-being, unnecessary suffering. I think the whole idea of Christianity, carrots and sticks, heaven and hell, is the same thing. Christians push it back into the spiritual realm, the eternal realm of what will maximize their happiness, their well-being, heaven. What do you want to try to avoid? The unnecessary suffering? Hell. Hey, thank you for the 5 loonies. You know what, Susan, I prefer 2 toonies and a loony, please. But thank you for your donation.
Is that the thing that people don't like about me? I am a Christian, and I know that weirds people out. You know, it really does. My threshold of belief for this God thing, to me, it was an easy jump for me to see that God existed in my mind. I'm not projecting my beliefs on anybody, and I don't want you to get upset or anything like that. This is just where I'm at and talking from the heart here. So I believe God exists, and it was self-evident for me. It was kind of easy for me to make that jump, and I don't think it was childhood stories or anything like that. It had a lot to do with a flower in the middle of a grassy field one day.
Yeah. So he basically said there that for him to believe in God was an easy jump, I think he said, it passed the threshold very easily to believe in a God. But when it came to Christianity, it had to do with a flower in a field, he said. Now you'll get answers like that often from Christians, and J. Warner Wallace said, don't talk about your testimony because your testimony doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not it's true. But my guess is if he went into detail about this flower in the field thing, my guess is it was some type of existential angst that was overcome through beauty or something like that, which is a horrible reason to be a Christian. It's a horrible reason to think a man rose from the dead and that the claims, if he made them, are true. This is a very logical, reasonable, scientifically minded man.
But think about it. To say that God exists, and then to make the next jump and go to, okay, well, you got the God thing, and then you got the Jesus thing. That's a totally different step, right? So how can Destin, this guy that seems like he's pretty honest with himself, yeah, he sounds like a redneck engineer, but how can he go from God to Jesus?
Good question.
Jesus, who did some kind of interesting things. Jesus said that he was God.
Actually, a book says that Jesus said he is God. This is it's so simple, but it's so very important, and this is I think what separates a lot of Christians from non-Christians, not just atheists. Is a Christian is more likely to take the New Testament and believe it. So when it says Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and life," they're imagining a man who walked on planet Earth 2,000 years ago actually saying these words. But really what we have, the evidence what we have is that someone recorded it anywhere from 20, 40, 60 years later, that a man supposedly said these words.
Okay? Probably the single most egotistical thing that's ever been uttered from human lips. Can we agree on that? Pretty stinking egotistical. But people heard him say it and they believed it. I don't know. You might not believe that even, but that's okay.
Yeah, so he acknowledges that. You might not even believe that the claim was made. So he realizes that.
So that's a pretty egotistical thing to say. So you got God, grave, and grace. Jesus.
God, grave, and grace.
Supposedly, zombie Jesus happened, right? Supposedly, these weirdo Christians believe that this Jesus guy rose from the dead.
You notice it's very interesting to me that he feels comfortable to call his own tribe weirdos. These weirdo Christians believe a man rose from the dead. He is smart enough to recognize that Christianity is weird. And I think even later on uses the word crazy. And this is something I strongly suggest Christians embrace. They shouldn't shy away from it, especially because their own text says the gospel is foolishness to those who are not Christians, true Christians. So I can tell this guy has above average IQ because he realizes that he's not going to sugarcoat this. This is nuts. This is crazy. This is weird.
That's crazy, bizarre stuff.
There it is.
And then the weirdest thing of all, which had a lot to do with where I found my belief, and I met my threshold of belief, is this weird thing called grace. I believe that I'm a screw-up, and I'm not going to push my beliefs on you, and I won't go any further, but if you'd like to know more, you're smart people. You know how to filter through the signal-to-noise ratio yourself.
Yeah, I did a video a while back on the concept of grace, and for Christians, grace is this: you don't have to do anything, God did it for you. And they don't count accepting the gift as doing something. They don't count that as a work. And they don't even count taking up your cross and following Jesus, or crying out to Jesus, or investigating the evidence for Jesus as work either, apparently. None of that's work. It's all grace. It's like And I always joke, and it bothers some left-leaning liberal atheists when I say this, but it's almost like a form of socialism, that you get something for merely being a citizen of the kingdom.
But anyway.
Or like the citizen of the United States. You get, apparently we're all getting checks for $1,200 in the United States just for being a citizen. We didn't work for it. We don't deserve it. We're getting it as a gift, just like God gave a gift.
I got to a point, and all I'm saying is my threshold of belief was met on all that stuff, which sounds crazy to you, and it sounds stupid, and I know it sounds stupid.
I love this. He's admitted that it sounds stupid.
And I'm okay with that, and I'm not threatened by that. I know you're not threatened by me because I'm the redneck guy from Alabama that doesn't know what I'm doing.
See, this guy is secure in his belief. He realizes that the people who are listening in the audience, who are looking at him, view him as crazy, and he's saying, I'm okay with that. And I am begging you, Christians, who are not okay with that, to somehow figure out a way to be okay with that. So you can stop saying, why do you view me as irrational? Well, because you believe a man rose from the dead, walked on water, turned water into wine, multiplied loaves and fishes, took demons out of a guy and put them in pigs, and the list goes on and on and on. But, not all Christians believe all that stuff, but in the United States, I think a lot of them do.
Right? I'm okay with that. But what I want to get people to recognize is...
Oh, good point, Mine Onion. He sounds like, see, Calvinists, you're right. Calvinists have no problem looking people in the eye and saying, yeah, this is a crazy belief. Yeah, this is weird. Yeah, I can understand how an outsider would view this as nuts. I kind of appreciate Calvinists for that. They totally get it. It's because you don't have the Holy Spirit in you and your eyes are scaled over and you can't understand these things. So we totally get it. We totally get it. Guys like you, Doug, just view us as irrational and so forth. Yes, of course. You're irrational for thinking we're irrational, says the Calvinist. They totally get it. So in that way, so maybe you're right, Mine Onion, that Destin Sandlin may be leaning Calvinist. I wonder if there's a way to figure that out.
There are people that aren't really 100% crazy that believe this stuff. Because what we're doing is we're all filtering through the same data. You all got certain holes on your body, right? You got eyes. What are you thinking about?
Hey, thank you so much, Gilmore Rig 104.
I was thinking about instrumentation ports like eyes, ears, and nose. I don't know about you. So
dirty joke.
We all look at this world, and we have all this data in front of us. The data is the world itself, and we're collecting this. And we're filtering it. We're running it through our signal processors. Yours is different than mine. You're on a different dot than I am.
This is very important what he's just saying. He's saying, look, maybe we're not all crazy for being Christians because, we all have these processors and we're taking in data and we're filtering the data differently. And this is something I've been saying for years, that this should be a clue to reasonable Christians that maybe your confidence should be lowered in Christianity because there are many intelligent, reasonable Christians who believe this. However, there's a lot of intelligent, reasonable non-Christians, Jews, Muslims, atheists, Hindus, Buddhists, Taoists, the list goes on, who have looked at the same data, filtered it through their processors, and have come up with a different conclusion. This is, in my opinion, the best way to control for bias, is putting all the biases in one big vat and stirring it about and see what we can agree on here. And it seems like people who have been raised in the Christian belief, in the Christian household, tend to be more likely to believe it. Those who are raised in the culture or country of Christianity are more likely to believe it. That it is true that if you were to predict when Destin Sandlin, where he would be born, if you didn't know Destin, but all you knew was he's going to be born in Alabama, or he's going to be born in India, and your question is, what worldview is he going to have? Probably.
I hit a point where my threshold of belief was met. So what I want to do now is I want to do a demonstration, something that kind of blew my mind a little bit. There was a guy that was a welder. He is a welder, worked with him. His name is Barney. Barney called me one day and he said, hey man, I got a weird bicycle. I need you to come down here and ride my bicycle in the weld shop. I was like, what the heck are you talking about? Barney wants me to ride his bicycle? That makes no sense. And so Barney called me down to the shop and he showed me this bicycle and it flipped my world upside down. It really did. So let me get the bicycle. Is there anybody that knows how to ride it?
Oh yeah, I've seen this before. I hope there's some people in this live stream chat who have no idea what's about to happen because this is pretty amazing.
Bike in here? Do you know how to ride a bike? Let's see, in the black shirt back here. Well, yeah. What's your shirt say? Science? No, I don't. Matt, can you ride a bicycle? Yes. Okay, cool. So this is something that happened to me a long time ago. Oh, by the way, there's kind of a formality we have to go through. So the Ramada Inn Convention Center, they said that their threshold of belief was not met, that we wouldn't kill ourselves on this bicycle. So we have to sign this piece to read that thing live. So this is the fun part for me because I'm an engineer. I really like this. You ever seen a bicycle like this? Yep. You have? Dayhan, yeah. Isn't that cool? All right, so this is a normal bike, right? Some of you have seen the video. But we've done one thing different. What is the one thing we've done different?
The controls are reversed.
The controls are reversed. So here's what I want to explain. So this bicycle, does everybody in the room understand?
By the way, I think this is an amazing analogy for how different worldviews see the world.
And how this bicycle works. Look at it real good. Do you understand how it works? What happens? Somebody explain it. When you turn right, the wheel goes to the... Let's go ahead and throw a helmet on. And when you turn left, the wheel goes to the right. Okay. So can we all agree that everybody understands how this bicycle works? Everybody raise your hand. We're smart people. Pretty much everybody's raising your hand. Okay, so here we go. Did you sign to meet the threshold of belief, the Ramada, that we're not going to hurt ourselves?
Donnie H in the live stream chat says, I have tried one of these bikes. It's freaking impossible. Really? Wow. I wish I would love to try it. I'm ambidextrous. I wonder if I'd be more likely to ride it than the average person.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. So Matt, what we're going to do is something that Barney did to me. He asked me to ride this bicycle. All we've done is we've changed one variable, and we all understand how this bike works. And so what we're going to do, let's just make this interesting. Let's do this. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. What I want you to do is use all of the understanding, all of the sensory inputs, all the data that you have at your disposal, and just use that understanding to operate the bike. Go for it. Get to me. Oh, come on, man. Give it a shot. All right, now hold on, man. Hold on, wait. Let's talk this through. Let's have a little meeting over here. Let's have a meeting. All right, so if we want to go to the right, which way are we going to turn the pedal? And if we want to go to the left, which way are we going to turn the pedal? Right, okay?
Yeah, see, the point of all this, I think, is what Destin is getting at, is the way to ride this bike is you have to cancel out everything you know. I don't even know if you can do that, but all your intuitions about balance, all your past experiences, you have to wipe clean and then completely rationally with your brain know how to balance on theoretical level and then make it work. And it's next to impossible.
So let's try it again. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, go for it. Oh, man. What's going on, Matt? Can you explain what's going on in your head right now?
40 years of muscle memory.
What's that?
40 years of muscle memory.
But we're smart. We're smart people, man.
Yeah, 40 years of muscle memory. And this is why a lot of Christians, the older they get, the more time it takes to leave Christianity. The younger you are, if you're like a 12-year-old Christian, and something doesn't make sense to you, you say, I'm out. It doesn't take long at all.
Matt, we are smart people. We can figure this out. Give it a shot.
Maybe I'll just go straight.
Straight. No pedaling, maybe. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird?
It's so weird. I can't stop myself.
And this is a great analogy for an atheist who's been raised in a home where there's no religion to listen to Christians talk or listen to what Christians actually believe, and they're just like, what? This is so weird. Like, it's like Christians are riding that bike, and when they get on it, it's like, there's no way they can ride that bike. the muscle memory from all those years of indoctrination, all the teaching, all the social, the community aspect. It's like you just can't wipe that clean and say, oh, now I believe, or oh, now I don't believe.
I can't stop myself from turning the wrong way.
Isn't that strange? It's really, really, really frustrating, okay? It's funny to everybody except for Matt. I promise, this is crazy. What's happening right now is every internet argument you've ever participated in. Is it not?
I know.
It's really weird, and are you not more frustrated right now than you've been in a really long time?
I knew this was going to happen. It's still frustrating.
Yeah, so what's going on right now is Matt's brain is getting in the way of Matt's brain. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's happening. It's strange. Can I get a shot, Matt? So everybody say thank you to Matt. I really appreciate it. So Matt, I have a shirt. Actually, let me show you. My wife had these shirts made. I have a shirt with a backwards bicycle on it, and I've got one in the room for you. I'm a bad person. I forgot to bring it. So everybody say thank you to Matt. Thank you very much, Matt. So.
Okay, now what Destin's going to try to do now is ride a regular bike, and so he brings a regular bike in here. Well, first of all, he rides the backwards bike. Here, I'll show a little bit of that.
You really can't. This is the most frustrating thing I've ever done in my life. And when I did this, not Cody, I'm bad with names today. Barney, the welder, was laughing his head off the whole time. He made this because he's a sadistic little redneck welder in Alabama, and he wanted to just mess with me and see what he could do. So what I did is I went and got a bike, and I practiced, and I practiced, and I practiced. How long do you think it took me to ride this bike, just like I'm doing on stage right now? What's that? A month? 30 minutes? It took me 8 months.
8 months it took him to ride that backwards steering bike. So the question I had in my mind was, if imagine your most Bible-believing, deeply strong Christian, and place that Christian in Norway or Denmark for 8 months. So all their community, their social interaction is with people of a different worldview. Would their confidence in Christianity drop to the point where they could ride the bike of, let's say, secular humanism? Is 8 months a good metric, a good time frame? And the reverse can go true. Let's say someone made a bet with me that, or a challenge, that I do nothing but study the Word of God and do nothing but pray for 8 months. Would I become a Christian?
It took me 8 months to do that. You know why? Because my brain was getting in the way of my brain. Okay? So I decided, I got all these people that think a certain way in my life, and I think just like them. I'm going to try to do something different, and it's going to be weird, but it's going to involve sticking a bicycle at the top of my driveway, and I'm going to ride a different kind of bicycle every stinking day for 5 minutes, and I'm going to reprogram my brain and figure out a different way to think. But you know what happened? What's that? Why? Because I've got a problem.
Catherine, 1,000 pine points to you. You asked a great question based on what I just said. Would you stop loving your wife if you were separated from her for 8 months? Well, that actually happens a lot in real life, especially for military guys, right? Oh, I apologize for the lighting. The sun outside is causing this. I think the probability does go up that the longer you're separated, that there's a greater chance that you'll find a replacement relationship. And so I think that still holds true for Christianity.
I can't ride a normal bike. So here's what's been happening to me. Every day for a year, I've looked at this bike and been very satisfied that I had dominated this thing. Felt really good about myself. But one day in Amsterdam, a really long time ago, I got back on a normal bike. This was a year ago, in fact. And when I got on this bike, I decided to impress the people.
Yeah, so now he goes on to show that when he got on a regular bike, he couldn't ride it.
Out of my way to try to learn a different way of thinking. And so people started lining up and looking at the dumb American. And they literally started gathering up, and they're like, what's wrong with this guy? And then something interesting happened. Let me see where my mouse is here. I got frustrated, obviously, as you do, and I started trying to explain to them why I couldn't ride the bike. I went and got references, and I was like, look, this is why I can't ride the bike. Look at how I ride my fancy bike at the house. And I just got really, really frustrated. Does that not sound like every internet argument you've ever had? But go look at these references. They back up my point. So here's what I've been doing. I haven't ridden a normal bike since the Amsterdam incident. And I want to make this really depressing and sad, and this might not work. I really have no idea. I haven't ridden in 12 months because I wanted to go to Skepticon, and I want to do this in front of you guys.
What's interesting about this experiment, and there's a reason why he's doing this at Skepticon, his point here is to say that the way you view the world has been trained into you over a long period of time. And that, I don't know if he realizes this, I'm sure he does, but that you can retrain your brain. In fact, okay, what's the timestamp here? 53, 52. I'm going to remember that. But there's a point in here where he says something very interesting. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, it's coming up.
I wanted to see how long it would take me to snap back, and this might not happen. So is it okay if I try to ride a bike in front of you guys? All right. So I can ride it the other way. I'm just going to try to ride it 10 feet. So here we go. Starts out funny. It really does. All right. So
this is a regular bike, just like you and I would have.
All right. So this is every internet argument we've ever had, because what's happening right now is I can't see things the way you guys see it.
Yeah, see, that's a interesting point. Internet arguments. What's the best way to talk to people on the internet who have a completely worldview than yourself? I basically have given up doing that, especially in text form, unless I have some type of relationship with the person, either face-to-face on camera, or I know them from something else. But if it's a stranger and you're talking to them, in fact, someone mentioned Discord. Why don't I have a Discord channel? Because I honestly think that if I'm interacting with people of a different worldview, text, it's most of the time, I think at least over 50% of the time, it's a total waste of time because of what Destin is showing here. That the muscle memory, the intuitions are so different, so out of sync compared to the other person, that you have to have some type of relationship to begin with to even try to understand the other person. And when street epistemology tries to do that by just repeating back over and over what the person says to convince the other person that you understand them and that you're hearing what they're saying, and that gives them more confidence to open up, to share. They feel like they're being understood, and so they're more receptive to a tougher question, for example.
Seriously, this is not funny. Yeah. All right, let me try again. I'm not getting very far, so I'm just gonna see if you can see what I'm doing wrong. I'm turning it the wrong way. This might not happen, guys. So this is where I'm at in my life. I have a master's degree in rocket propulsion. I can't ride a bicycle. So here's the deal. This is what I want you to think about with your life. Seriously, the first degree I got was a mechanical engineering degree, and I'm looking at these gears right here, and I can tell you the contact stress angle on these gears. I can tell you the name of the curve. It's called an involute curve. I can tell you the pitch diameter. I can tell you everything about those gears. I can't sneak and ride a bike. So what does that mean, guys? What is the application to our own lives here? I'm angry if you can't tell.
This is the key part.
What is the application in this? You can brainwash yourself.
You can brainwash yourself. That's very interesting for a guy like Destin, an intelligent guy who's a Christian, to admit that you can brainwash yourself into riding the bike one way or another over time, and maybe even what you believe. So the real question is, how do you use skepticism to arrive at truth? How do you use anything to arrive at truth if we are so susceptible to brainwashing?
You can change the way you think. We all have cognitive biases. And you can do whatever you want to try to change that cognitive bias. And you might succeed. And if you succeed in changing that cognitive bias, you're not going to be more of a free thinker. At least in my case, this is me. I'm talking about me. I have no idea what you're doing with your life. What I discovered about my brain is that I can make an effort to think differently, unlike anybody else in this world, and stinking unlearn how to ride a bicycle. But all I've done is just change my cognitive bias. So how do I know what truth is?
Great question. How do you know that you haven't brainwashed yourself into thinking you have the truth versus actually having the truth? See, I think a lot of skeptics, they would say, in order to know that the truth, the metaphysical truth of the universe, 100%, you have to be omniscient. And so the next step, and since we're not omniscient, so the Calvinists would say, but you have access to someone who is omniscient, and therefore you can know the truth. I get it. I understand it. But for non-Calvinists and people like myself would say, okay, the next best thing is we experiment. We have models. We test things and try to get as close to the truth as possible.
I give up.
Yeah, it's a good thing he gave up because he almost hurt himself there.
So,
and that's what a lot of our internet type conversations are like. Like at some point you just give up, right? It's like you try and nothing's going forwards. I can tell pretty quickly whether or not a conversation is going to be productive, and I could be wrong. And there's probably a lot of, there's probably a lot of productive conversations I could have had with people that I've just rejected and just said, it's not worth it. I'm trying to think, what are some markers that I have found? If I'm talking to a Christian and one of the first things they say to me is they use the word argument or logic or rationality or irrationality or whatever, I'll be honest with you. My first thought is insecurities, leave this person alone, not worth my time. Because it tells me they're out of the gate, they want the friction. They want the fight. They want to show you that you're wrong and that they're right. Now, for other Christians who approach me and ask a short, simple question, and I answer it, and they say, thank you for answering, and they build up a rapport over time, I tell you, that's the way to do it. I'm trying to think, what are some other markers that you shouldn't waste your time? Like, I can freely talk to someone who is very stubborn, very dogmatic. Like, I have no problem, I think, talking to a presuppositional Calvinist. In a lot of ways, they are easier to talk to than, let's say, an evidentialist Baptist person who is, I don't know. I think maybe it's a matter of fear. If I can tell that their fear level is high, I think I just back off. If I feel like they're secure in who they are, and they're not going to get defensive right away, because if someone is going to get defensive very easily, then that puts more work on me to help them not be defensive. And that's just so much work. It's like you have to be careful what pronouns you use, what words you use, because if you use the wrong words, it sets up a signal in their brain that they're under attack, and so you got to pull back. But with other people, it's like they have thick skin, and you can say almost whatever you want, and they're not going to yap back at you. So, I forget how Destin brings this all together.
Really wanted that to work. So, this is what I want to, I'm really mad. This is what I want to hit home here. Just because you meet somebody that doesn't see things the way you do. There's one guy in this room that can ride this backwards bicycle in the backwards mode, right? And there's one guy in this room that can't ride it the normal way. And it's really, really, really frustrating that I can't see your point of view right now. And I can't ride a bicycle like you can. How does that translate to rational thought? How does that translate to religion, faith? All these things, they're important questions. We're just talking about a bicycle. But what about the questions that matter? I'm sorry, I have to do this again. How does this translate? I just assume right now you have pity on me because you seem like nice people and you promised me high fives. How are you feeling about me right now? Do I look like an idiot? Are you mad at me? You're scared for me. Is anybody mad at me right now? Because when we disagree with people on the internet who simply can't see things the way we do, we tend to get mad. And we tend to call them names. Anyway, that's what I want you to think about. It's not that I don't want to see things your way, because I want that more than anything in the world right now, I promise. It took me 12 months. I'm going to go home and try to learn to ride that bike both ways, because the next time I do a talk, I want to be able to do it both ways. But my point is, when you see somebody that doesn't look at the world just like you do, don't get mad at them. Love them, right? Just like you had pity on me up here because I'm an idiot from Alabama that can't ride a bicycle even though I got a piece of paper saying I'm really smart, but apparently I'm not because I can't ride a bicycle. Think about me. Think about the idiot from Alabama. The next time you get ready to go into an internet debate, you're like, man, maybe this guy that I'm arguing with has some kind of threshold of belief that has been met that I don't see.
Yeah, that's the key is to talk about that threshold of belief. And is it consistent? Like a lot of Christians would say, my threshold of belief is far too skeptical, far too high of a hurdle to get over when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus. But then I would say the opposite. I would say a guy like Destin, his threshold of belief is too low. In fact, if I gave the exact same evidence for Mormonism or just a made-up belief, a made-up worldview, and then slowly layer in the evidence for Christianity, would he believe that worldview? And so maybe the issue is consistency of your threshold of belief. Are you consistent? Now, I think I am consistent. I think because I don't believe Christianity is true, I don't believe the core propositions that a man rose from the dead, that he wasn't God in flesh and so forth, that allows me to say stuff like, I don't believe Jesus appeared to Joseph Smith. I don't believe that Gabriel appeared to Muhammad speaking the words of Allah. That allows me to say, I don't believe the miracle claims that I hear from other religions. I think I'm pretty consistent. But I think what Christians end up doing is they say, yeah, I have my threshold of belief for Christianity, and when I hear a miracle claim or a fantastical claim in a different religion, oh, that's just demons from within my worldview tricking them or leading them astray. Or maybe that's even their God using different ways to communicate with people of other worldviews. So they have their outs. So I guess that's the way they would say they deal with their threshold of belief. But then they have to keep in mind that people of other religions could say the exact same thing, that it's their God using Jesus to reach them to the true God. Like, I think even Muslims say that. How's my volumes now? I don't know why the volumes are so different compared to usual. There was another video that people wanted to, one subscriber wanted me to go through. Audio okay now? Okay, great. I know people love this person. Let's see if I can find it. It was Frank Turek. But let's see if I can find the video. There was a really smart guy asked Frank Turek a question. It's about the New Testament authors. I don't know if I can find it. Oh, here's one 2 days ago. God is good, drowning people. Is this a PineCreek fan?
I mean,
Now look, it's 1 a.m., all right?
Okay, hang on a second. 1 a.m.
Can we just stay on, which question you want me to deal with?
the drowning. Why would he drown somebody and do that instead of just poofing them out of existence?
Yeah, I think, okay, this was March 23rd. Yeah, this guy is definitely a PineCreek subscriber.
And I'm kind of interested in ethics and philosophy, and you're hearing all this new, justice is coming out, social justice, restorative justice, and that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so one of the things that we had a discussion about was like the flood and the crucifixion, right? Why didn't God just like poof them out, or why was there drowning? Why was it necessary to drown them, and why was it necessary to be crucified?
With regard to the drowning, I don't know why it was put that way.
What would you do, though? I mean,
What would you do? Yeah, to this PineCreek fan, I would have said, give the whole scenario. You don't know what's going to happen, but God gave you two options, so you know it has nothing to do with morality, because God is giving you the option, so you know it's moral. Poof or drown, and God's saying, what do you think I should do? Just for kicks, I want to hear your opinion, says Yahweh. That's how you should set it up.
Well, I'm not God. Doesn't matter what I do.
well, if you
See, yeah, I'm not this. If you frame the hypothetical correctly, a guy like Frank can't get out of it and say, well, I'm not God, so it doesn't matter what. No. In this hypothetical, God's saying, hey, just for fun, Frank, I want to know your opinion. Both are moral. I can poof them out of existence or drown them out of existence. My justice will be served equally. What would you say I should do? Keeping in mind we got men, women, children, babies, pregnant women, unborn babies, so forth, and animals.
because from the perspective of like justice and like, to me, like you correct somebody to prevent an activity, and like that.
Oh, no, well, sometimes you punish somebody with death. We do that now.
Right. But the question is, what's the manner of the punishment? Should we do lethal injection, guillotine, drowning, putting them to sleep first and then killing them?
Right? And God is a being that has the ability to take any of us out at any time. Because we don't have the ability to take other people out, and I don't mean dating, you get it, to kill people, all right? We don't have the ability to murder people because we're not the author of life. God has the ability.
Yeah, we definitely have the ability to kill people. What's he talking about?
To kill people, and he doesn't murder them because he's the author of life. And he can move them to the next life anytime he wants. I mean, if Christianity's true, people never die, really. They just change location.
So why
They
go through
from
the
this life
whole
to next life.
like pain and torture of it then? I've been having discussions of like the purpose of hell, and like, do people go to hell, and what is hell?
Yeah.
Do people get poofed out of existence, or is it separation from God, or is it fire and brimstone?
All right, wait, do you want to talk about
so,
hell,
like-
or do you want to talk about...
Well, they're both kind of the same to me. To me, it's kind of like, what is the justice in either of those situations? The drowning or hell?
Well, God can decide how somebody dies if he wants to, right?
But does that
but-
make it right? I mean, God is...
God is the standard, okay?
Yeah. This PineCreek fan deviated too much. The issue here is to raise the cognitive dissonance in the Frank Turek's intuitions of justice, of what's fair, and so you have to frame it in the sense of, what is your opinion, Frank? What would have been your suggestion to Yahweh? And force Frank to say that he would have done something different than the God actually did. In other words, you can even tell Frank ahead of time, I'm going to ask you a question. My goal here is to pitch you against God. to have you say something that goes against God. You can lay your cards. This thought experiment's so good. You can just tell them what's coming, and it's not going to make a difference. And you'll see, I think if you frame it the right way, you'll see Frank, he'll so badly want to say poof, but you can see the cognitive dissonance gears grinding but I know God drowned, so I got to say drowned because that was the right thing to do, and I don't want to say the wrong thing to do.
Okay, so if you're going to say, well, God, you're not right for doing this, you must have a standard outside of God that says he's wrong.
Well, I mean, so we had a discussion of church shopping too. Everyone goes.
Okay, wait, hold on.
I mean,
now look, it's 1 a.m. All right. Can we just stay on which question you want me to deal with?
The drowning. Why would he drown somebody and do that instead of just poofing them out of existence? If
Well,
you had that choice,
maybe he wanted it to be he wanted people to observe. I'm speculating.
See that right there? I think he framed it the right way. Let's see.
Which question you want me to deal with?
The drowning. Why would he drown somebody and do that instead of just poofing them out of existence?
Yeah, that's not bad.
If you had that choice,
maybe he wanted it to be he wanted people to observe. I'm speculating.
Wanted people to observe. There's only no one in his family left.
Yeah. Maybe wanted people to know that it's serious to sin against God.
He wanted people to know that it's serious. There's only Noah and his family left, Frank. Those are the people. And Noah was righteous, so he already knows it's serious. So that can't be the reason.
Okay. I don't know.
Boom. I don't know. Great answer. Whenever you get an apologist to say, I don't know, there's victory in Jesus.
Doesn't explain it in the text.
Yeah.
All right. But
so what do you believe? Why would you do that if you were God?
I'm not God. I don't know the big picture. I don't know everything that's going on and what God's trying to do. There's something known as the ripple effect.
Yeah.
And the ripple effect is that an event that occurs today can ripple forward into the future to affect trillions of other events. And we can't see how they all affect one another. Why does God do one thing here? I don't know. Maybe because if he does it another way, he won't get the ripple effect that he wants to come later.
Yeah, and this is why I asked this question of Mike Winger 2 years ago, and he got really upset with me. And then he brought up a situation of a man raping women, and the justice is, you got to make this, it's serious, so you got to put pain onto that rapist as a deterrent to others. And that's sort of what Frank was saying. But deterrence is not the issue with the Noah's flood story. And then when I turned it around on Mike and I said, okay, but what if I told you that not only the rapist, but the people he raped all have to suffer justice, all have to die, poof or drown? It was easy for Mike to say drown the rapist. But then he was stuck with saying, oh, if it's that choice between either drowning all of them or poofing all of them, you would poof. It's easy to see it in that scenario, but Mike, for the life of him, could not get himself to say, yeah, I would have suggested to Yahweh, if they're both moral, both just, and God's leaving it up to me, I would say poof. Because, a 5-year-old treading water and drowning, why not just go blink and they're gone?
I don't know. We can question God all we want. Job did that.
Yeah.
And what did God say to Job? Well, Job, you don't even know how I run the physical universe. You're going to question me on the moral universe? If God exists, he is the standard of righteousness and goodness. And any deviation from his nature is what we call evil. God can't do evil. He can bring judgment, which we might perceive as evil, but it's not evil because it's justice.
So by definition, God is good and all his actions are good. Anything he does is good.
Anything he does is good.
Okay.
Yes, anything he does is good.
Based on his nature.
Based on his nature. So an action that I do to another human being, let's say it's a bad action, and God deems it as immoral. Now, if God does it or sanctions the exact same action, it becomes moral. This is the problem that I think Christians have. And divine, they say the Euthyphro dilemma is not really a dilemma, but I think it still is.
Now, the one logical possibility here is you and I have the wrong God. That's logically possible. that the God of the Bible is not the true God. What isn't logically possible is that there are immoral things going on and there's no God.
Why is that? What did Frank just say?
That's logically possible, that the God of the Bible is not the true God. What isn't logically possible is that there are immoral things going on and there's no God.
That is just totally false. Frank, if you ever listen to this, can't you imagine, conceive of an evil God? What you think in your head as evil currently, imagine that being the nature of the creator deity. So it's an evil God, right? So you got a God existing and evil existing. And then now you have the problem of good. Why do we see good in the world? Why do we see people helping each other? Well, because this evil God wanted free will. And so he wants people to freely choose evil, but sometimes they go astray and choose what today we conceive as good. Yeah, if Frank was ever to talk to a guy like me, I guarantee you he would go full precept. I think that's and if I was him, I would do that too. I don't think he really has a choice. Okay, there was this is the video I wanted to play. Were the Gospels written by the disciples originally in Greek? I thought this guy, he did pretty well.
Yes, sir. What's your name?
Hello, my name's Matthew.
Hey, Matthew.
So I'm just curious because you earlier were mentioning something about how we don't necessarily need the Bible to understand morality. Is that correct?
You get more details in the Bible that you wouldn't have if you didn't have it, but basic right and wrong, thou shalt not kill, murder, steal, that we know that intuitively.
Okay. So I guess my question is, so assuming that's true either way, would you agree the Bible is written by men?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Yes.
It's written by men, yeah.
And this is something that I can struggle with, but I study linguistics and I do a lot of stuff with languages, and to my knowledge, and I think to a lot of biblical scholars, but I can't name it off the top of the head because it's something I just recently was reading. But ancient, it was like some form of like ancient Greek was the original version of language that the New Testament was written in. Is that what you believe as well?
Jesus probably spoke either Aramaic or Hebrew, and it was written in Koine Greek, yes.
Yes. Okay. So, how do we believe, or how do you believe, rather, it might be a better question, the Bible was written originally? Like, so do you believe, up there it says opponents admitted Gospels written by disciples? Are you saying written, like the Gospels according to Mark were written by Mark, or are you saying that just disciples is in somebody that follows, like, the teachings of the Bible or something like that?
Who wrote the Gospels is the question? Or
Yeah, just addressing the one point, saying the opponents admitted Gospels written by disciples. So I was just wanting a clarification.
Okay, yes, well, as far as we know, the writers of the New Testament, there's 8 or 9 writers depending upon who wrote Hebrews. Most of them bear the name of the person, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, except, the letters of the Apostle Paul.
That's wrong. That's false. He said most of them bear the names. No, they don't. No, they don't. None of the Gospels have assigned, Mark wrote this. Here's Mark's Gospel. Here's my Gospel. My name is Mark. Here it is. In fact, I think if you do a word search, I'm not sure if this is true for Mark, but if you do a word search for the word Luke within the text of the Gospel of Luke, you're not going to find the name Luke.
There's about 13 of them. And then there's other letters written by people like Peter, Jude.
So clarification, you believe
James.
Gospels according to Mark was written by Mark?
Yes.
Okay. The same exact...
And the reason why he believes that, and this is so funny to me, is because Protestants become Catholics. Protestants become Roman Catholics when it comes to stuff like this, like who authored the New Testament. Because I think a lot of Protestants value the Bible more than tradition, but yet they use tradition to defend the Bible.
Disciples, like, written in the Bible, so Mark in the Bible wrote Gospels according to Mark. Yes?
He wrote the Gospel according to Mark.
Okay.
That's what the earliest evidence shows, yes.
Well,
now, he was probably getting his information mostly from Peter. That's the thought there.
Well, I would say that most of the evidence points to that.
And the Gospel of Mark actually doesn't say that. Hey, I'm Mark, and I got most of my information from Peter. Doesn't say it. That's a later tradition So here, Frank Turek is becoming a Roman Catholic, embracing the traditions of the early church.
That being completely false, because the people at this time and Mark, the position that he was in socioeconomically, had no knowledge of Greek at all.
Oh, no, sure they did.
I disagree. I think most historians would disagree with that, and I think most biblical scholars admit that Mark did not write the Gospels according to Mark. You just attest to it.
Well, wait, are you saying Koine Greek did not exist in the first century?
No.
Yeah, see, this is, of course he didn't say that it didn't exist, but he's saying it's more probable than not that someone from Galilee or the Palestine area would be fluent in Greek.
No, I'm saying that most people spoke
Writing Greek.
Aramaic at that time. Most people also did not speak Hebrew, ancient Hebrew that was mostly attested to religious figures. And as fishermen and as these followers of Jesus, they were not in the church. They were not wealthy. They did not have high socioeconomic standing that is associated with knowing either ancient Hebrew or ancient Greek.
Well,
everything this young man is saying, I think, in this part anyhow, is true. But I can just hear the screams from especially the evangelical Christians saying, but we know, but.
What you're doing, though, is you're taking...
But we know Eusebius, and we know that he talked through Irenaeus, and we have some writings.
Taking aggregate data, Matthew, and you're applying it to individuals, and you can't do that.
Oh.
You can go the other way.
Sorry, why not?
It would be like saying that...
I mean, we look at statistics, we look at evidence, and we say, to our best of the knowledge, people of his socioeconomic standing did not have the knowledge of this language to be able to write the Gospels according to Mark in point A Hebrew.
What you can't do is, like suppose you say that the average, just I'm making something up, the average income in Fairfax...
Like, I remember this. Listen to this. This is just... I hate to say this, but this just shows that, in my opinion, Frank's IQ is not that high.
Virginia is $100,000 a year per household, and that's the average. You can say, okay, that's the average, but you can't point at one person in here and say, you're making $100,000. You can't take aggregate data and apply it to individuals, just like you can't take the aggregate of the knowledge of the first century and apply it to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, because...
Yeah, see, Frank's totally missing the point of this young man. It's like if we're coming from the point of view of we don't know who wrote the Gospel of Mark, maybe a guy named Mark did, maybe not. But if we're coming from the position we're trying to figure out what the truth is, then you have to go with what's more probable using the historical method. And this young man saying, hey, it's more probable that someone very educated, very fluent, probably even wealthy, wrote the Gospel of Mark.
Because you don't know if they were a special case.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point, is that we don't know specifically. And so when you don't know specifics, you go by aggregate data because that's what the closest average person is.
But if you have testimony from reliable people that says they did write it.
There's the but I was talking about.
But
if we have reliable church father traditions, so this is the point where a Protestant becomes a Roman Catholic.
I had testimony from reliable people that said that man did make $100,000, then I would say or 200 or whatever it was, then I would go with that rather than trying to apply the aggregate data to the individual.
Sure, but where do we see any evidence or statements that are reliable saying that Mark is able to speak and write exquisite point A?
The early church fathers widely attested the gospel writers to the names that we have now, and there is no other data from that time period which suggests any other authors.
Sorry, but the religious figures at that time are very notorious for completely fabricating information or records about religion.
Matthew, you are again taking aggregate data and applying it to individuals.
What? And I'm saying,
because the Bible's special, don't you know? The church fathers, they wouldn't make this stuff up. They wouldn't try to come up with a way to distinguish one gospel from another and just slap a name on it. And and they wouldn't have reasons to do things like this.
Saying that because we have no knowledge of these specific people at that time, we have to go by the best possible information.
No, we do
know.
have knowledge. We have people writing and attesting about it.
Yeah, you're saying religious figures who, again, are notorious for going back into the period of time that Jesus existed, where the record...
See, at this point, I'm tempted to say, if I was there, I would say, but we have traditions and attestations of people attesting to things that Joseph Smith did and said, or that Muhammad did and said. Maybe not as much, but, well, that's not reliable, Doug. That's because we know from other evidence that he was a con artist and yada, yada, yada.
Words were contemporaneous.
Matthew, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What would the writers of the New Testament, what motivation would these people have to invent all this?
I don't claim to know.
What motivation would they have to invent this? Well, maybe they wanted to start a belief system and have people follow it. What motivation would Joseph Smith have to start Mormonism, I wonder? What motivation? What motivation would Muhammad have starting Islam? What motivation? I think that it's better to answer Frank's question with that type of question. And let Frank answer his own question. Well, maybe it was money. Maybe it was fame. Maybe it was a sincere desire for the truth, but they were mistaken.
Any motivation.
Okay, so then why are you applying nefarious motives to these people that you don't even know?
Are you talking about... No, I'm talking about two separate people. You're saying that we have writings from religious figures who, in that same vein, fabricated evidence, such as... I don't remember the exact guy's name, but there was a really famous... I think it was like Josephus. Was a very famous Roman historian. Josephus. Sorry. Pronunciation's wrong. I wasn't sure the exact pronunciation, but he's very famous for being very... strict in writing about historical figures, especially religious messiah figures at the time. And it's been pretty accurately debunked that the writing that was in Josephus's work about Jesus existing was completely fabricated by religious figures at the time.
Okay,
Yeah, he shouldn't have said completely. With guys like Frank, you got to soften your position a little bit. In fact, just view it, ask it as a question, like, was everything Josephus said about Jesus correct, you think, Frank? And let Frank answer that type of question.
First of all, that's not true.
That is true.
No, Matthew.
I mean, we can disagree, but
okay.
There's one truth. So.
First of all, the only way you can tell if somebody is misquoting something is if you know what the actual quote was.
Yeah, there's some actual quotes in the Old Testament that Paul misquoted. It's funny, when I bring that up with Christians, talking about the misquotes in the New Testament back to the Old Testament, they say, oh, but no, the Old Testament was actually the wrong one, the New Testament was the right one, and then the Jews, they changed it later. I actually have had Christians say stuff like this. I don't want to bring up specific examples, because I've done it in other videos. But yeah, if you're a Christian and you're not aware of that, there's many cases in the New Testament where the New Testament authors misquote, probably on purpose, the Old Testament.
Right. So what should Josephus have said rather than... You're talking about the famous passage in Josephus. Now, scholars do agree that Christians altered some of what he said.
Scholars agree that Christians altered some of the things he said. I wonder if Frank would admit that scholars agree that Christians altered some of the things in the New Testament.
But we have an Arabic version that appears unaltered. And it still talks about Jesus, and Josephus also talks about Jesus when he talks about the death of Jesus' brother James. But I don't know what that has to do with Mark writing Mark. Let's just say you're right. Let's just say we don't know who wrote the Gospels.
See, this is interesting to me. After all this is back and forth, what Frank's about to say next is like, why didn't you lead with this?
So? Does that mean that what was written in the Gospels is false?
No, I'm not saying that. I was just saying that it shows that they're trying to put this in a more elegant situation, but to attest that the writers were there at the time and that these specific biblical figures lends truth, if you believe in that, to the authenticity of the Bible. And I'm just saying that that does not seem to be the case.
That's exactly right. Christians will say, we know who wrote these, so we got eyewitness accounts, and so therefore we can be more confident that it's true.
I'm saying you use that as further proof, once you already believe, of evidence of, oh, look, Mark was there, Mark wrote the Bible, this has to be true, or this is more likely to be true.
Okay, look, yeah, we know documents and sources were written very early. I didn't have time to go through it here. Yeah. Even Bart Ehrman, the great skeptic from UNC Chapel Hill, admits Paul writes 1 Corinthians in 55 AD. And
okay, if I have an amazing claim right now that that I can fly, the analogy to this would be in the year 2045. No, 2055, 30 years later. In the year 2055, well, let's say 2020, in the year 2045, let's bring it back a decade. So I do something amazing today, and then someone writes about it, puts it on paper in the year 2045. Show of hands, how many people are confident in that? Something amazing today, written about for the first time, that we have record of anyhow, in the year 2045. That's what we have with Paul.
And an ancient creed that talks about Jesus dying and rising from the dead and everybody that he appeared to comes all the way from the 30s AD. It can't be legendary.
It can't be legendary. That is so wrong. That is so... It can't be legendary. How, is it Frank, do you mean it's logically impossible? Is it impossible to be legendary? If it happened months after, if some amazing claim happens and then it's accepted a month later, and I'm sure there's examples. In fact, even Joseph Smith, I think he wrote down stuff about what he experienced of Jesus. I think it was under a year after what he said when it happened. So he saw Jesus, Joseph Smith saw Jesus on January 1st, and by the end of summer, he wrote his diary or book about it. Not the Book of Mormon, but he put it in his diary. It was a very short amount of time. So that means it can't be legendary, right, Frank? If it's that short of a time? Like, all these guys have to do is just stop and think for a second and apply a different case to what they're saying. And they can see very quickly, well, maybe they can't. Maybe it's back to Destin, what I showed earlier, that because Frank is used to riding a bike a certain way, it's impossible for him to ride it any other way.
That creed is put in 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8. This is very early stuff. It cannot be legendary. Now the question is, how do you interpret the data, not what is the data? People, atheists, Christians, everyone in between, agree on the data. The question is, how do you interpret it? Do you say Jesus rose from the dead or not?
I don't even think that's true, that Christians and non-Christians agree on the data. I think some people fight even on the interpretations of single words, let alone the data. No.
You know, Bart Ehrman, the great skeptic at UNC Chapel Hill, will not take a position.
Some say that some data is not even legitimately in the New Testament. So how can people agree on the data?
On an alternative explanation for the resurrection, because he knows that every position he tries to take has holes in it that can't support the weight of the evidence. So the real question is, did Jesus rise from the dead? Not who wrote the Gospel of Mark, or whether Mark told everything exactly the way...
Yeah, this is... the fact that Frank wouldn't believe his own wife if she told him that she saw someone who both her and Frank knew was dead. And if Frank's wife came home one day and said, I saw so-and-so rose from the dead. Myron. I saw Myron, and Myron rose from the dead. Frank would not believe his own wife. I am quite sure of it. His mind would immediately think, my wife's mistaken, or my wife has gone crazy, insane, or my wife was been slipped a drug, or my wife saw someone who looked almost exactly the same as Myron, the real Myron, who's now dead. But for some reason, because it's in this book that Frank, from a very young age, has viewed as very special, this is a special book, he believes it.
It should have been told. The question is, did Jesus rise from the dead? And that's really the issue.
Sure. So kind of a funny thing, but that was leading into my point about morality, was just if the Bible is written by man, and if we don't necessarily know the authenticity or whether or not these people are telling the truth, whether or not they're lying or not, how do we go about understanding better of what is God's morality? Because we have to just make assumptions based off of the Bible, based off of what we believe God has said or God has done, and we interpret that in various ways. So my point was more, it does seem like, sure, if God exists, there's an objective morality, because whatever God commands is objective morality. But my point being is, how do we, as people, understand exactly what that is when God himself did not write the Bible, when it's just other people saying this is the case, and it's other people's interpretations? Because when you write something down, especially when God is saying this or God is saying that, or...
Yeah, it's a great question. He's taking too much time to get to it, but a good analogy is, if God exists and he's the perfect transmitter, how do we, since men wrote it, and men are not perfect, they're the receiver of that perfect signal. Here's the perfect signal. Here's the receiver that's imperfect, that's a little fuzzy. How do we know that what God intended to communicate was received by the fallible human beings in the correct way?
God commands in certain ways. When people write this down, how do you know they're accurately writing the events, and how do you move from a relative understanding of your own personal interpretation and morality of the Bible to a divine, this is...
All right, let me just ask you a quick question, and then we got a line behind us, so we'll have to go. The quick question is this: do you have any doubt that murder is wrong?
That's a stupid question, because it's an axiom, basically. Murder is defined as wrong. It's the illegal killing. So the question should be something like, do you think killing is wrong?
That rape is wrong. That theft is wrong.
Even rape, you would have to first make sure that it was consensual. So if there's certain things that are defined as wrong based on a certain standard, saying, hey, we just say that if you do action X, it's wrong by definition. So if you see that action take place, then you can say it's wrong.
I mean,
do you have any doubt?
Sorry, we have to define motive. So if motive is just
no. Do you have any doubt that murder's wrong?
Most likely, no.
No, you don't have any doubt, right?
No.
That's my point.
I would specify that there are situations and...
Okay, yeah. See, if I were him in this situation, I'd say, okay, Frank, no, I don't doubt murder's wrong. However, if I see someone pull out a knife and stick it through the heart of a person on the street corner, I say, oh, that person just murdered another person. But can you think of situations where what you saw, what you thought was murder, maybe was not? Maybe it was self-defense, and you just didn't see the whole picture. Maybe by killing that person, that the person who did the killing was saving many lives. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe you just saw the knife go through the heart, but the person was a butcher or something and was walking down the street with his knife, and he tripped and stumbled, and it was just a bad accident. So it's very easy to say, yeah, murder is wrong, but human beings are fallible, and maybe after getting more information, after a week or two, we realize, oh, that wasn't murder.
And there's a struggle that personally I believe, but I won't go into this, but it has to do with whether or not my eternal life in heaven is worth other people's lives. More or less, if I could murder somebody and then that would send me to hell, but it saves hundreds of thousands of other people, should I not feel obligated to do so? And so there's cases, I would say, where
Well, Jesus
action of killing
volunteered to murder.
Yeah, what this guy is trying to get at is that morality is subject to the context. Therefore, morality is relative in some sense.
To be murdered.
Like God commanding the stoning of homosexuals was right at one period in history. Here's a question to ask Frank Turek, if there's anybody who's going to be at a Frank Turek show. Ask him, if President Trump and let's say the United States Congress decided that practicing homosexuals should be stoned to death, on what basis could Frank say that would be a wrong piece of legislation? What would he use out of the Bible to say, no, don't vote for this because this is objectively immoral? Hasn't God instituted the government of the United States? Doesn't the government yield the sword, have the right to punish? Isn't there precedent that God himself at one time in history said that stoning practicing homosexuals is the right thing to do? Isn't that precedent? Can we not in law use precedent and say that stoning homosexuals in the future is now that we should do it? How would a Christian justify not stoning a practicing homosexual using the Bible? The government doing it. The government doing the stoning.
For my benefit and for yours. Let's talk later because we're out of time, and I appreciate the question.
Yeah. But it's good to see. It's like the questioners at Frank Turek's shows here, they're getting better and better. Is there any Christians here? So if you came late, I started with Destin, Wilson, Sandlin. I didn't know he had 3 names. I think it's going to get tougher and tougher for apologists in Q&A sessions. Titanicus. So yeah, I gotta be really careful over the next 7 days not to infect anybody, just in case I have it. If you came late, I mentioned that there's been a confirmed case that I've been exposed to. What do you think is the best thing about Christianity is PineCreek, and what is the worst thing about it? Oh, the best thing about Christianity is the same for most religions, and that is hope, meaning, and purpose. It gives people comfort. What's the worst thing about it? Ugh. What's the worst thing about Christianity? Vicarious redemption pops up in my head. It's pretty evil, but not all Christians believe that. Poof. My apologies to Destin from Smarter Every Day. He was scheduled to come on, but we ran out of time. Take care, guys. Have a great day. Stay safe.